Dance tango. I'll marry you. Arab billionaire CEO mocked. But black waitress danced like a pro. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's incredible story. At a luxury restaurant in the heart of Manhattan, a lavish dinner party was underway. The room shimmered with crystal chandeliers, and the laughter of well-dressed guests echoed around the room. A group of elite individuals, the wealthiest in the tech industry, were dining, celebrating a business deal that was worth millions. The energy was high, and the anticipation in the air was palpable. But it wasn't the business deal that would steal the spotlight that night. No, it was something much more unexpected. Kamal Aziz, a billionaire CEO with a reputation for being ruthless, sat at the head of the table. His company, Aziz Technologies, was one of the most influential in the world. He was known for his cold demeanor and his iron grip on the industry. As he spoke, his voice boomed with authority, commanding the attention of everyone in the room. His presence alone was enough to make anyone feel small. But it wasn't just his wealth that gave him power. It was his unshakable belief that money and influence could control every aspect of life, even the people around him. And that night, Kamal decided to make a point of showing just how much control he had. He leaned back in his chair, eyeing the staff who were waiting tables, and his eyes landed on one young waitress, a woman named Tasha. Tasha was in her mid-20s, wearing a simple black uniform, and she was doing her job with quiet efficiency. She wasn't particularly striking, but she carried herself with a quiet strength. She had worked at this restaurant for over a year, taking extra shifts whenever she could to support her family. She was focused, attentive, and professional. But to Kamal, she was just another member of the help. He smirked as he looked at her, and in a moment of what seemed like a playful but belittling gesture, he spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Hey, sweetheart," he called to her, his tone dripping with condescension. "I'll give you $100,000 if you can dance the tango with me. If you can make me impressed, I might even consider marrying you." The table erupted in laughter. Kamal's guests chuckled, some clapping at his remark, clearly enjoying the idea of a billionaire so making light of a humble waitress. They all believed it was just a joke. After all, what could someone like Tasha offer in comparison to a man like Kamal? But Tasha didn't laugh. She didn't shrink away or apologize. Instead, she stood there, frozen for just a moment. The entire room fell silent, unsure of how she would respond. And then, without saying a word, she moved. Tasha stepped forward, her heels clicking on the marble floor with confidence. She looked Kamal in the eyes, and, without missing a beat, she held out her hand. The room held its breath. Was she going to back down? Was she going to play along with the joke? But then, to everyone's surprise, she took a deep breath, and in a smooth, fluid motion, she began to move. The tango she danced was flawless, her movements sharp, elegant, and full of grace. Her feet glided across the floor, and the room watched in awe as she showed a level of skill that was far beyond what they expected. Kamal's smirk faltered, and his eyes widened in disbelief. He had underestimated her completely. The laughter from earlier faded, replaced by stunned silence. It was clear that Tasha was not just a waitress. She was a professional, a force to be reckoned with. Kamal stood frozen for a moment, his mouth slightly agape as he processed what was happening. No one had expected this. No one had expected her to be anything other than the invisible service staff. But Tasha had proven them all wrong. The room was silent, the air thick with disbelief. Tasha's movements were so graceful, so fluid, that it was impossible to ignore her. The guests were frozen in place, their laughter gone, replaced by stunned expressions as they watched her perform a perfect tango. Kamal stood motionless, his eyes wide, unable to comprehend what was happening. He had mocked her, humiliated her, and yet here she was, standing tall, dancing like a professional, showing them all that she was far more than they had ever imagined. The music faded into the background as Tasha's every step seemed to command the room. She wasn't just dancing. She was telling a story with each movement, each turn, and each pause. Her elegance was undeniable, And for the first time that evening, the guests began to see her as something more than just a waitress. The song came to an end, and Tasha stopped, standing tall with a quiet confidence. There was a brief moment of silence before the room erupted into applause. Kamal's face was a mixture of confusion and admiration. He had expected to be in control, to be the one holding the power, but now he was the one who was humbled. The guests, many of whom had once dismissed Tasha as just another employee, were now looking at her with a new sense of respect. Kamal, however, still couldn't believe what had just transpired. He had thought of Tasha as nothing more than a pawn in his game. But now, she had flipped the script entirely. He cleared his throat, standing up from his chair. "Well, that was unexpected," he said, his voice slightly shaky. "I suppose I owe you an apology, Tasha." The words hung in the air, but Tasha didn't respond immediately. She simply nodded, her eyes never leaving his. She wasn't going to say anything that would give him the satisfaction of thinking he could take credit for her moment. She had earned this respect on her own. And then, in that brief exchange, the power dynamics in the room shifted. Kamal wasn't the powerful billionaire CEO anymore. He was just another man, standing before a woman who had proven her worth, a woman who had shown him that dignity and self-respect could never be bought. As the guests continued to murmur amongst themselves, some still processing what had happened, others starting to recognize Tasha for her strength, Kamal made a decision. He walked over to her, his steps heavy, his posture stiff with unease. He had always been the one to make others bend to his will, but now he found himself in unfamiliar territory. "Tasha," he said, his tone now more measured, "I want to make things right. If you want, I can offer you a job. At one of my companies, a position with real influence." The words were tentative, as though he didn't quite know how to offer them without losing face. Tasha, however, didn't hesitate. She looked him straight in the eye and spoke, her voice calm yet firm. "I don't need your job. I don't need your handouts. What I need is for people like you to learn respect." Her words cut through the air, and for a moment, Kamal stood there, speechless. He had no response. This was a different kind of power, one that he didn't know how to control. Tasha's simple but powerful response was all the answer he needed. The room fell silent once more as Kamal took a step back, his shoulders slumped. He knew that he had just experienced something he couldn't undo. The power shift was real, and there was no going back. For the first time, Kamal understood that money and status couldn't buy respect, and that dignity could never be diminished by anyone's arrogance. As the night went on, Tasha's victory became the talk of the event. Word spread quickly, not just about her flawless dance, but about how she had completely turned the tables on one of the most powerful men in the room. And as for Kamal, the deal he had been negotiating that evening? It was off. The respect he had hoped to gain from the business venture was replaced by something much more valuable: humility. He knew he would never forget this night, the night he learned that true power came from within, not from money or influence. It was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life. The evening ended, but Tasha's triumph would be remembered for much longer than any deal or transaction. And as the guests filed out of the restaurant, one by one, they knew that they had witnessed something far more important than business. They had witnessed the undeniable strength of a woman who refused to be dismissed, who had fought back with nothing more than her dignity and her skill. And that, they knew, was worth more than any contract or business deal. The night had shifted, the energy in the room completely transformed. Kamal Aziz, the once commanding billionaire CEO, now stood awkwardly to the side, watching as Tasha moved through the room with the quiet dignity that had become her trademark. The guests, who moments ago had laughed at her expense, now saw her with new eyes. They whispered among themselves, their respect for her growing with each passing moment. The once prestigious power dynamics were no longer as clear-cut as they had seemed. Kamal, still stunned by the events that had unfolded, found himself alone with his thoughts. He had built his empire on control, on being the one who held the cards, and now, for the first time in a long while, he realized how fragile that power truly was. As the night wore on, Tasha remained the center of attention, not because she craved it, but because she had earned it in a way that no one had expected. Her dance was flawless, but it wasn't the dance that had captivated everyone. It was the sheer force of her will, the quiet confidence that she carried with her every day. She was more than just a waitress, more than just an employee. She was a woman who commanded respect, who knew her worth and refused to let anyone tell her otherwise. Kamal knew he had made a mistake in underestimating her. As the guests began to filter out of the restaurant, Kamal found himself left standing at the table, his mind racing. He had to do something. He had to fix this. He couldn't let her walk away without making amends. Tasha was just about to exit the restaurant when Kamal made his decision. He approached her cautiously, his steps heavy with the weight of what he had to do. "Tasha," he called out, his voice more somber than it had been all evening. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The silence hung between them, a stark contrast to the earlier tension that had filled the room. Kamal took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before speaking again. "I want to apologize," he said, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "What I said, what I did, it was wrong. I misjudged you, and I was wrong to treat you that way." Tasha didn't immediately respond. She looked at him, her gaze piercing, as if evaluating the sincerity of his words. Kamal shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't look away. "I want to make things right," he continued. "I'd like to offer you a position at one of my companies. You deserve more than to be treated like an outsider. You deserve respect, and I see that now." Tasha listened in silence, her eyes never leaving his. She could feel the weight of his words, but she wasn't sure if he truly understood the gravity of what had happened. "I don't need your position, Kamal," she replied calmly, her voice measured. "I don't need your charity. What I need is for people like you to treat others with respect, not because you can, but because it's the right thing to do." Her words were simple but powerful, and for a moment, Kamal was speechless. He had expected a response, a thank you, maybe even an acknowledgement of the opportunity he was offering. But instead, she had just reminded him of the core of what he had forgotten. True respect doesn't come with money, and it certainly doesn't come with power. It comes from treating people with dignity, regardless of their status. Kamal took a moment to let her words sink in. He realized, in that instant, that no amount of money, no position in his empire, could ever replace the respect she had shown. "You're right," he said softly, his tone a mixture of regret and understanding. "I've lost sight of that. I won't forget it again." Tasha gave him a small, knowing smile, one that spoke volumes without a single word. "Good," she said simply. "I hope you don't." With that, she turned and walked out of the restaurant, her head held high, leaving Kamal standing alone, finally understanding the true meaning of power. The guests who had witnessed the exchange were left in awe. They had seen something rare that night, something more valuable than a business deal, more significant than wealth or status. They had seen the power of humility, the strength of a person who knows their worth, and the undeniable truth that true respect is earned, not given. Kamal stood there for a moment longer, reflecting on the lesson he had learned, one that would stay with him long after the night ended. And as the last of the guests filed out, he made a silent promise to himself. He would never again make the mistake of underestimating someone based on their position. Tasha had shown him that power is not always what it seems, and that sometimes the quietest voices are the most powerful. The days following the dinner were a whirlwind for Tasha. She had become the center of attention, not just among her colleagues at the restaurant, but among the city's elite. News of her performance had spread quickly, and she found herself being recognized by people she had never met before. It was a strange, almost surreal feeling. For years, she had worked behind the scenes, unnoticed, underestimated, and yet now she was a name people were talking about. But for Tasha, this newfound recognition wasn't about the spotlight. It was about something much deeper. It was about proving to herself that she was worth more than the labels others had placed on her. It was about showing the world that her worth wasn't tied to her job or the color of her skin, but to her character, her abilities, and her resilience. Kamal Aziz, the billionaire CEO, had continued to reach out. Their conversations had shifted from business to something more personal, more genuine. Kamal wasn't asking for her advice anymore. He was learning from her. He admitted to her that her strength and self-respect had forced him to question his own views on power and success. Tasha, however, didn't take his words lightly. She knew that actions spoke louder than words. She wasn't interested in his apologies or his offers of mentorship. What mattered to her was that he had acknowledged his mistake and that he was trying to change. But she also knew that she didn't need anyone's validation. She had already proven everything she needed to prove. One afternoon, a few weeks after the dinner, Tasha was sitting in her small apartment when her phone buzzed. It was a message from Maria, her best friend. Tasha, you won't believe this. Kamal Aziz wants to host an event in your honor. He wants to throw a dinner at his mansion and invite some of the top CEOs in the country. He says you've inspired him, and he wants to show the world what true power really looks like. Tasha stared at the message for a few moments, unsure how to respond. She had never been one for lavish events or public attention, but she couldn't deny the significance of the invitation. This wasn't just about recognition for her. It was about a larger message. It was about showing others that anyone, no matter their background, could rise above adversity. It was about proving that respect could never be bought. It had to be earned. She thought about it for a while before typing a response. Tell Kamal I appreciate the gesture, but I'm not interested in a fancy dinner. I've already had my moment, and I don't need to be celebrated to know my worth. But Maria didn't stop there. Tasha, this is bigger than you. Kamal is doing this because he believes in what you stand for. He wants to create a platform for people like you. People who have been overlooked and underestimated. It's not just for you. It's for everyone who has ever been told they're not enough. Tasha sighed, thinking it over. The idea of being honored in such a public way made her uncomfortable, but Maria had a point. Kamal's offer was more than just a dinner. It was an opportunity to send a message to the world. After some time, Tasha decided to accept. She agreed to attend the event, but on her terms. She wouldn't be a passive guest. She would use the opportunity to speak, to tell her story, and to remind everyone in that room that true power wasn't about money or status. It was about integrity, respect, and the willingness to stand up for what was right. The night of the event arrived, and Tasha stepped into Kamal's mansion with a quiet confidence. The grand staircase, the marble floors, the golden chandeliers, it all felt like a world she had never been a part of. But she wasn't intimidated. She had seen the truth behind the glitz and glamour. She knew that the people in that room weren't any different from her. They had simply been given opportunities that she had not. As the dinner progressed, Kamal stood up to give a speech. He spoke about success, about innovation, and about how meeting Tasha had changed his life. He spoke about the value of humility and respect, and how, through her, he had learned that true leaders didn't dominate others. They lifted them up. When it was Tasha's turn to speak, the room grew quiet. She didn't need a microphone or a stage to command attention. She stood up, looked around at the room full of CEOs, investors, and influential figures, and began to speak. I don't need to be here because I've proven my worth, she began. Her voice steady but powerful. I'm here because every one of you should know that there are people like me everywhere. People who have been overlooked, undervalued, and underestimated. But that doesn't make us any less worthy. I've spent my life fighting for respect, not because I wanted recognition, but because I believe in my worth. And I believe that everyone, no matter where they come from or what they look like, deserves the same respect. Tasha paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. The world is changing. People like me, people like you, we have the power to shape it. But that power doesn't come from wealth, and it doesn't come from status. It comes from how we treat one another. As she finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. Kamal, standing beside her, looked on in awe. Tasha had done it. She had proven that the true measure of power wasn't in what you had, but in who you were. And with that, the night became more than just a celebration of one woman's triumph. It became a turning point, a moment that would echo through the lives of everyone who had been there. The weeks that followed the event at Kamal's mansion were a blur for Tasha. Her life had changed in ways she hadn't anticipated. The public recognition, the media attention, and the offers that followed were overwhelming. But amidst all the newfound fame, she remained grounded. She knew that this moment wasn't the culmination of her journey. It was just a step along the way. What mattered most to her was not the accolades or the applause, but the fact that she had stayed true to herself and her principles. She continued to work at the restaurant, despite all the changes in her life. It was a place that had shaped her, a place where she had learned the value of hard work and humility. Tasha wasn't ready to let go of her roots, not yet. As she walked into the restaurant one evening, she was greeted by familiar faces, her colleagues who had become like family over the years. They were all buzzing with excitement, eager to tell her about the latest news. Tasha, You won't believe it, Maria said, her voice full of excitement. There's a new project in the works. Kamal's offering to fund a program that supports people like you. People who've been underestimated and overlooked. Tasha listened intently, her curiosity piqued. Kamal had mentioned his desire to give back, but this sounded different. He wasn't just offering money or a position. He was looking to create a platform for people to share their stories, to lift each other up and break the barriers that had once held them back. This could be huge, Maria continued. You could be a part of it, helping others find their voice. Tasha thought about it for a moment. She wasn't interested in being in the spotlight again. She had already made her statement. But the idea of helping others who had been through the same struggles she had, that was something she could get behind. I'll do it, Tasha said quietly, her voice filled with resolve. If it helps others find their power, then I'm in. As the weeks went by, Tasha became more involved in Kamal's project. She was instrumental in shaping the direction of the initiative, using her own experiences to guide the development of the program. It wasn't about making her name known. It was about creating a space for people to be seen and heard. Kamal, for his part, was dedicated to making this work. He wasn't just paying lip service to the idea of change, he was fully invested. He followed through on his promises, ensuring that the project was not only funded but also had the resources to make a real impact. As the project grew, more and more people came forward with their stories. People from all walks of life, from different backgrounds and experiences, shared how they had been overlooked or underestimated. Tasha listened to each of them, offering support and guidance where she could. She knew that this was the real work, the work of lifting others up and showing them the strength they already had within. It was a journey that had come full circle for Tasha. She had started out as just a waitress, trying to make ends meet, and now she was helping to create a platform for others to find their voice, just as she had. The program gained traction, and soon it was recognized as a powerful force for change. Kamal, who had once been a symbol of everything that was wrong with the system, was now using his resources for good. He had learned from Tasha, and in turn, he was teaching others the value of respect and humility. Tasha never expected to become a leader. She never sought the spotlight. But sometimes, life has a way of pushing you into a role you never imagined for yourself. She had proven that dignity, respect, and hard work were the true measures of a person's worth, and now, through this project, she was helping others to do the same. As Tasha looked back on her journey, she knew one thing for certain. The real power in life wasn't in the hands of the wealthy or the powerful. It was in the hands of those who refused to be silenced, those who fought for what was right, and those who believed in themselves, no matter what. The project was just the beginning. Tasha knew that the work would continue, and that the change she had sparked would ripple out into the world, one story at a time. The fight for respect, for dignity, and for equality was far from over. But Tasha was ready. She had already faced the hardest battle of her life and had emerged stronger than ever. Now, she was ready to help others do the same. And that, she knew, was the true measure of success. Months passed, and the ripple effect of Tasha's actions continued to grow. What started as a single act of courage, a moment of defiance on a dance floor, had sparked a movement that was now gaining momentum. Kamal's initiative had become more than just a project. It had turned into a global conversation about respect, equality, and the importance of seeing people for who they truly were. The program, which had once been an idea, was now an established platform helping people from all backgrounds share their stories and gain the recognition they deserved. Tasha's involvement was no longer just about being a figurehead. It was about shaping the future of the initiative. She had become a leader in her own right, but in a way that felt natural to her, by staying true to the very values she had always believed in. Kamal had transformed alongside her. The man who had once been dismissive, who had used his power to control, was now using his influence to make a difference. They were no longer just working together for the project. They had formed a partnership rooted in respect, humility, and the understanding that real change comes from within. As the program expanded, Tasha and Kamal began traveling to different cities, meeting with people who had been directly impacted by their efforts. They attended summits, held workshops, and connected with community leaders. Everywhere they went, Tasha spoke with passion and conviction, sharing her story and encouraging others to find their voice. The more she spoke, the more she realized how much the world needed these stories. She had been one of the lucky ones, able to rise above the limitations placed on her. But so many others were still struggling, still fighting for a chance to prove their worth. And that was why this work mattered. One evening, as Tasha and Kamal prepared to board a flight to another event, Tasha received a call that caught her off guard. It was from a former colleague at the restaurant, Maria. "Tasha," Maria said, her voice urgent, "you won't believe what's happening. There's a major company looking to hire someone like you for a leadership role. They've seen the work you've done, and they want you to come in for an interview. They believe in what you stand for." Tasha was silent for a moment. The idea of leaving the restaurant, of stepping into a corporate world she had never imagined, was daunting. But as she thought about it, she realized something important. She had built her reputation not on titles or status, but on her character. This opportunity wasn't about climbing the ladder. It was about using her influence to make real change, to show others that they too could overcome the obstacles in their way. She called Kamal later that evening to tell him about the opportunity. He was supportive, as always, reminding her that no matter where she went, she would carry the same values with her. "You've already proven everything you need to prove, Tasha," he said. "Now it's about taking what you've learned and spreading that message even further." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Tasha knew that her success didn't depend on impressing others with her achievements, but on showing them who she truly was. The interview was unlike any other she had experienced. She walked into the room, not as someone trying to fit into a mold, but as someone who had already shaped her own path. The executives were clearly impressed with her story, with her drive, and with the authenticity she brought to the table. They weren't looking for someone who would just follow orders. They were looking for someone who could lead with empathy, who understood the power of respect and the importance of lifting others up. Tasha left the interview with a sense of clarity. This was the right step, not just for her career, but for the movement she had started. She was offered the position, but more importantly, she knew that this was her chance to continue making a difference on a much larger scale. The role would allow her to mentor others, to inspire change within the corporate world, and to challenge the very systems that had once held her back. As she stood outside the building, the city lights twinkling around her, Tasha took a deep breath. She had come a long way from that night in the restaurant, from the woman who had once been invisible to those around her. She had earned her place at the table, not through favors or handouts, but through her own strength, her own resilience. And now, she was ready to take on the next chapter of her journey. Her story was far from over. It was only just beginning. Months passed, and Tasha's life continued to evolve in ways she hadn't expected. The corporate role she had accepted became more than just a job. It became the platform she had been searching for to continue her mission of inspiring change. With each passing day, she realized that the impact she could have in this new position was far-reaching. She was now in a place where she could challenge outdated systems, lift others up, and continue to teach the value of respect and dignity. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Despite the newfound respect she had earned in the corporate world, there were still moments of pushback. She often found herself in rooms full of powerful executives who were used to having things go their way. They didn't always understand her approach, especially when it came to valuing people over profits. Some of her colleagues questioned her methods, doubting that she could bring change to an industry that had been built on tradition and hierarchy. But Tasha was undeterred. She had faced adversity before and had proven that she was capable of standing her ground. She didn't need to conform to their expectations. She was there to challenge the norms and build a culture of inclusion and respect. And it wasn't just about the people she worked with. It was about the people who were still being overlooked, still being dismissed. Tasha often spent her evenings working on the initiative Kamal had started, continuing to reach out to those who had stories to share. She had made a promise to herself that she would never forget where she came from, that no matter how much her life changed, she would always give back to the community that had shaped her. As the program grew, it began to get more attention from the media and corporate sponsors. Tasha, along with Kamal, spoke at events, sharing their story and pushing for greater representation of marginalized voices. They worked together to create scholarships, mentorship programs, and networking opportunities for those who had been denied a seat at the table. The more Tasha spoke, the more she realized how powerful her own voice had become. It wasn't just about being the one to lead the change. It was about being the one to ignite that spark in others. The stories people shared, the transformations that took place, were proof that real change could happen when people were given the chance to shine. As the months passed, the success of the initiative became undeniable. Tasha's leadership, her unwavering commitment to fairness and respect, had influenced not just her company, but many others who followed her example. Kamal, who had once been a figure of authority and wealth, now stood beside her as an ally, fully committed to the cause of giving others the opportunity to succeed on their own terms. But despite the success, Tasha never let herself lose sight of what was truly important. She continued to work with the same dedication and humility that had defined her from the beginning. She knew that the fight for equality wasn't over. She had seen firsthand how easy it was for people to slip through the cracks, for voices to be drowned out by the noise of those in power. And as much as she had accomplished, there was still so much more work to do. One day, Tasha received a letter from someone she hadn't expected to hear from again, her mother. The letter was short but heartfelt, and it brought tears to Tasha's eyes. Her mother had been proud of her all along, but she had never fully understood how much Tasha's work meant to her until she saw the changes Tasha was making in the world. The letter spoke of hope, of pride, and of a belief that Tasha was doing something that would leave a lasting legacy. It was the first time Tasha realized just how far she had come, not just in her career, but in her personal life as well. She had not only earned the respect of her peers, but also the admiration of those closest to her. As Tasha looked back on her journey, she realized that the true measure of success wasn't the recognition or the position. It was the ability to make a difference in the lives of others, to change the way people saw themselves and their potential. She had taken the challenges she had faced and turned them into opportunities for growth, for herself and for those she had touched along the way. The story of Tasha was far from over, and she knew that the impact she had started would continue to spread. She had proven that a single moment of courage could spark a movement, and that one person could change the course of an entire industry. The journey was just beginning, and as long as she had the chance, she would continue to fight for the respect, dignity, and opportunities that everyone deserved. As the years went by, Tasha's impact only grew. The initiative she had helped create became a beacon for change, empowering people from all walks of life to rise above their circumstances and show the world their worth. What had started as a small, seemingly insignificant moment, her graceful tango, had sparked something far bigger than she ever imagined. The stories continued to pour in, from people who had once been dismissed and overlooked, now finding success in their careers and lives. Tasha had shown them that their worth wasn't tied to their job title, their background, or their appearance. It was about the strength they carried within, the resilience they could tap into when the world told them they were not enough. One day, as Tasha stood in front of a room full of bright, eager faces, ready to address the new batch of participants in the mentorship program, she realized something. She had gone from being the one who needed help to being the one who could offer it. She had become the mentor, the guide, the very thing she had always dreamed of. She looked around at the faces in the room, each one filled with hope, and smiled. This was the legacy she had built, not just for herself, but for everyone who needed someone to believe in them. Kamal, standing beside her, was now an unwavering ally in her mission. He had transformed over the years, no longer the man who believed wealth could solve everything. His support of the initiative had made a real difference, not just through financial backing, but through his genuine belief in its purpose. He had come to understand that true leadership was about listening, empowering others, and making space for voices that had been silenced for too long. Together, they had created something truly powerful, an environment where everyone, regardless of their background, could thrive. Tasha's role had evolved, and with it, her influence had expanded. She was no longer just an advocate. She was a leader, a role model for so many who had once felt invisible. But no matter how far she had come, she never lost sight of where it all began. She remained committed to the people she had promised to help. She continued to reach out to those who were still struggling, reminding them that they, too, had the power to change their circumstances. As the years passed, Tasha was offered more opportunities, bigger platforms, more visibility, but she never sought fame. She wasn't interested in the accolades. She was interested in the change she was making, the lives she was impacting. and that was what kept her grounded. She continued to mentor, continued to speak out, continued to use her voice to challenge the status quo. She was a reminder to those who doubted themselves that anything was possible if they had the courage to believe in their own worth. One evening, as she reflected on her journey, Tasha received a letter. It was from an old friend, someone who had watched her journey from the very beginning, someone who had seen her fight against the odds and had always believed in her potential. The letter was simple, but it moved her deeply. It spoke of pride, of admiration, and most importantly, of how Tasha had inspired this person to take their own leap of faith, to challenge the world's expectations, and to believe in their own strength. The letter reminded Tasha of how far she had come, not just in her career, but in her own personal growth. She had shown others what was possible, but in the process, she had transformed herself. Tasha knew that the world still had a long way to go in terms of equality and opportunity. There were still battles to be fought, still ceilings to be broken. But for the first time, she felt confident that the work she had started would continue long after she was gone. The seed of change had been planted, and it was growing, slowly but surely. She had fought for respect, for equality, and for the dignity of every individual. And in doing so, she had shown the world that true power was not found in money or status. It was found in the courage to stand up, the strength to speak out, and the belief that no one should ever be underestimated. As Tasha stood by the window of her office, overlooking the city that had witnessed her transformation, she realized that she had fulfilled her mission, not through grand gestures or fame, but through the quiet, everyday acts of strength and resilience that had defined her life. She had proven that respect and dignity were not privileges to be given, but rights to be fought for. And as long as she had the chance, she would continue to fight, for herself, for others, and for the future she knew was possible. Discover the inspiring journey of Tasha, a woman whose life proves the power of perseverance and the importance of standing up for what is right. From being a humble waitress to becoming a leader in a powerful initiative, Tasha's story challenges the status quo and uplifts others. This is one of the most powerful Black stories that highlights the significance of dignity, respect, and the strength to overcome any obstacle. Tasha's path wasn't easy, but her courage in the face of adversity ignites a movement that transforms her life and the lives of others. As she rises to prominence, her story encourages people from all walks of life to believe in themselves and prove their worth. With a strong message about empowerment, Tasha's journey serves as a beacon for all those who feel invisible, reminding them that they too have a story worth telling. Her experience is an example of how Black stories can change the world, inspiring a new generation to never back down. From a single moment of defiance to a lasting impact, this Black story continues to inspire and create waves of change in communities everywhere. Tasha's story is proof that one voice can make a difference, and her legacy will continue to impact future generations, showing them the power of resilience and the importance of respecting every individual's worth.